I rise today to speak on the report on the inquiry into the management of child sex offender information tabled in this place recently. This inquiry was born after a motion agreed upon the House and which was introduced by myself on behalf of Darren Hinch's Justice Party. During the inquiry, we heard from victim survivors, previous offenders, academics, local and international justice agencies, advocates for child safety and many, many others. Special thanks goes to Bruce Morecambe from the Morecambe Foundation, who made a submission and appeared before the inquiry. It is those with the lived experience of how the mismanagement of child sex offenders can have tragic consequences. They are powerful advocates for change. Although the responses were quite mixed in terms of a public sex offender register, we had some in favour and we had some against. I was quite surprised at the level of interest in a limited disclosure scheme overall. In fact, most submissions, including those from the Law Institute of Victoria, VicPol, Information Commissioner, all were in favour of exploring a limited disclosure scheme. Studies conducted have indicated broad community support also for a limited disclosure scheme. Dr. Karen Gelb, in her submission, spoke of an Australian study which examined the perception of sex offenders that found that around 73% of participants supported access to sex offender registers by parents or carers of children. Interestingly, even those opposed to a public register did go on record as stating that there were situations in which having the knowledge of the whereabouts of convicted child sex offenders would be useful. This point was reiterated in evidence provided by Carol Ronkin from Bravehearts Foundation, who stated, and I quote, "Who would not want to know if they had a convicted child sex offender living next door to themselves and their children," unquote. Also, Dr. Michael Davis from the Australian Psychological Society stated that on one occasion in court he said, and I quote, "Your Honour, as a citizen, I think I would like to know, but as a forensic psychologist, I know I am probably better off not knowing," unquote. We also found that the usual arguments against the public sex offender register were rebutted with statistics, including that of vigilantism. The Western Australian Community Protection website, since the commencement of the scheme in October 2012, has been accessed many hundreds of thousands of times. In just under a decade, only 3 people have been charged with a vigilante offence. That is 0.0000075%. Also, from the review of the Western Australian model, it was identified that the scheme had not resulted in many of the adverse consequences that were previously anticipated. So with all the scaremongering about giving those caring for children access to information about potential threats to their safety, it seems that this has been unfounded, in particular with the Western Australian disclosure model. Additionally, reviews of current disclosure schemes in operation in the UK and also in Western Australia indicated that the adverse impacts upon sex offenders had been negligible and significantly less than anticipated. We heard about the success of the pilot of the limited disclosure scheme in the UK, which has since been rolled out across England, Wales and Scotland. This scheme has allowed many thousands of applications. Mr. Robert Jones from the National Crime Agency in the UK spoke to the inquiry and expanded on the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre app designed to keep kids safe on the social network and primarily aimed at safeguarding children from online sexual exploitation. Mr. Jones stated that in 2020 to 2021, there were over 1,200 children safeguarded as a result of that reporting tool. Fantastic result. 1,200 children kept safe from sexual abuse. Just think about that. What was also common through the majority of submissions and hearings was the lack of data available in terms of sexual assault reporting, something of which I've been calling for and raised in a motion not too long ago in this place, and which had been voted down by the government and certain usual crossbenchers, something of which is a total blight on this chamber. On this note, I was pleased that the committee recommended developing a best practice model for online grooming education in Victorian schools as part of the wider curriculum. There's never been a more important time with every child since COVID having access to an online platform. With this comes responsibility for every child to know the signs of online predatory behaviour. Having information available to members of the public concerned for the safety and well-being of children in their care must be prioritised above all else. We at Darren Hinch's Justice Party are all about putting children first, above the rights of convicted child sex offenders, and we will not stop advocating for the rights of all sex abuse victims and all those who are vulnerable to the exploits of these hideous creatures. The sexual abuse against children continues. Sexual predators are out there, grooming those whose innocence has been exploited and waiting to strike. They are out there and you are kidding yourselves if you think otherwise. I welcome this report. Look forward to seeing the recommendations implemented as soon as possible for the safety of our children.
Dr. Barch.